What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? When my daughter was very young, 3 to 4, we were on a family vacation in a state park lodge. Our room had exposed wood ceiling beams to match the decor. Important later. It was supposed to be nap time for my daughter, but she was quietly playing by herself and just chatting away, and the wife and I were eating on the other bed. Out of the blue my daughter turns to me and asks for a piece of rope. I asked why she needed the rope and she nonchalantly replies it is for my friend, the purple girl on the ceiling. My wife asks what friend, and my daughter responds I've been talking with the little purple girl hanging from that wood up there. She asked me for another piece of rope. Needless to say that nap time was over, and we quickly exited the room. When I was 20 I visited a town in Italy that has a number of medieval towers that you can climb. My girlfriend didn't want to climb any, so I went up one on my own, and was the only person at the time doing so. It was a sunny day when I entered the tower. There was a flight of stairs that wound around the edge of the tower and no windows. Climbing the tower took at the very most 5 minutes. At the top of the stairs there was a ladder and a trapdoor that opened up onto the roof of the tower. When I opened it, I found the weather had changed dramatically and was overcast and threatening. I forget if there was thunder or not, but I was genuinely concerned about lightning being at the top of a tall tower in that weather. I cautiously climbed out onto the roof just to have a quick look before going straight down. The roof was surrounded with a sort of metal cage of bars that were clearly intended to prevent anyone falling/jumping off the tower. I heard some thunder and saw electricity arc between some of the bars. Not a blinding lightning strike, just arcing. I decided that the tower was imminently going to be struck and descended as quickly as I could. At the bottom I was surprised to find the weather was again sunny with a clear sky. My girlfriend could tell I was shaken and was amazed when I told her I thought that maybe there had been lightning. The weather hadn't changed whilst I'd been up the tower. I've started to tell the story a couple of times, but it's just too weird to expect anyone to believe. I have literally no explanation. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'm not religious, and I've had no other weird experiences like this. In short, I'm not your stereotypical spooky things happen to me kind of person. And yet, edit, did a bit of googling, and I'm 90% sure it was the Tor Grosser in San Gimignano. It doesn't have a cage around the top, but there is a metal cage around the bells and I guess that's what I remember. When I was 5, me and my identical twin sister both caught scarlet fever. We are from America, but my dad's project had temporarily relocated us to India, and we were not used to the water and food there. We both fell into a coma towards the end of the fever. One day I woke up to my mom and aunt screaming and crying and holding my sister because she was unresponsive and not breathing. They were doing chest compressions, CPR, etc. but nothing was working. I was desperately trying to get their attention because I was young and didn't understand what was going on. I went back in my room to go back to sleep, but in the corner of the room where my sister's bed was, I saw her laying there, breathing fine. I went back out to the living room and realized I was looking at myself in my mom's arms as she tried to revive me. Eventually, I saw my eyes flicker open and then everything went dark. I woke up a few weeks later in the hospital next to my sister and mom, who ended up catching it because of us. My mom told me I had almost died and they were trying to wake me up, but I was unresponsive, so the ambulance took all 3 of us into the ICU. To this day, I'm still unsure how I witnessed my almost death. I used to live in the middle of nowhere. The town had less than 200 people in it. I used to work through the night in one of the metro areas, and it was about a 40-minute drive with about 15 of it on a county road. I used to think I would see shit in the fields, coyotes, deer, etc. all the time. Never thought twice. Well, one morning I was on my way home, about 3 AM, and we had a little bridge to cross right before we got to our road. As I'm closing in on crossing the bridge I can see something pearl white just hanging out in the middle of the road. Thought it was probably a swan, and it would move. As I got closer I realized that swans are not that big. I was in a ref 150, and it was at eye level with me. When its wings opened up it literally covered both lanes of traffic. I swerved to miss it, but hit some of the wing. I slammed on my brakes and turned around. Whatever it was 100% gone without a trace. Never saw it again. If it was a bird, that's the fucking biggest bird I have ever seen. Oh, and I did not alive by anything considered to be a large body of water. Edit. The only thing I can describe it as a humongous crane, but the only area where cranes live close to that old house was about 5 hours away. I got recalled into work and was driving at about 3 AM. I was in a very rural area in western Washington. As I come around a curve I see a woman in a nightgown on the side of the road looking up at a steep embankment. Just standing there staring away from the road. There are no homes nearby, not for miles. I call 911 and pull over about a minute up the road not knowing what to think. Deputy showed up, couldn't locate anyone, and was as dumbfounded as I was. It was around midnight and my cousin and I were going to Walmart to get cookies. We were almost there, and I randomly looked in my rear view as we went through a street light, and saw someone immediately walk across the street behind my car, as soon as I left the intersection. As in they had to already been walking in the street as I passed through the light, if that makes sense. I thought it was weird but kept driving. On the way back, coming up on the same intersection, there's a guy dressed in all black walking, including a hat and sunglasses, on the side of the road. He's starting intently at the car with a creepy ear-to-ear smile on his face, and as we come up to pass him, he jumps towards my car and lunges to grab the passenger side door. I was going about 35 miles per hour, so I'm not sure what the guy was trying to accomplish. I swerved to avoid him and look in my rear view to see him jump in front of the car that was behind me. My cousin and I were freaked out. I called the cops. Nothing ever came of it, but it was scary at the time. A couple of summers ago myself and some friends from university went to visit one of our friends' houses since we were going to a festival nearby and had been offered to stay over. Long story short, her family are extremely rich with a huge old mansion in the English countryside. As with any home this big, we had a bit of a tour around and were shown our guest rooms. Her dad began to tell us that the place was haunted in a joking tone and mentioned that when they first moved their dresser had been left behind in one of the guest rooms, the one I was staying in. This was one of the only things left behind, and they'd found a lock of hair in one of the drawers. I'm not really a believer of ghost stories, so at the time I just shrugged it off as a joke, although it's still a bit weird admittedly. That night I got into bed and began to notice that the air felt strangely cold around me, but there wasn't a particular breeze. The rest of the house had been a perfectly normal temperature just before this too. As I slept I kept having the most surreal dreams, nothing like when I'd normally sleep. I'd constantly awaken feeling cold. It was like when you're very unwell and find yourself somewhat hallucinating in bed while you dip in and out of sleep. The other weird thing was that this was the middle of August, and in the UK we don't typically have air conditioning, not unless you're in an office or something. I woke up the next morning, and on one side of the room there are two hanging rails for clothes. The guest room is normally used for storing spare clothes. Several of the clothing items were on the floor. The hangers had completely come off the railings, and I could have sworn these were all hung up the night before. Like I say, I'm not really a believer of paranormal stuff, but that night has spooked me ever since. I've never experienced anything quite as strange. I do wonder if her dad's stories of it being haunted had planted a placebo in my head, though. When I was a kid, 10 to 11 years old, I awoke in the middle of an autumn night and looked out my window. There, just 20 to 30 feet away from me were two spherical balls of light dancing around each other. They seemed to float in midair. I assured myself I was awake, and I was. They bounced around for a while, then disappeared slowly, like a light dimming. It was fucking weird. Edit. Remembered more. It was pitch black. I grew up in Norway, and in autumn it gets really dark. It was also raining, or a light drizzle. I distinctly remember the drops of water on the window creating a trippy visual interacting with the spheres. I must have been watching a good few minutes, and the spheres were moving really slowly past an outhouse in our garden. My memory of this is really not one of fear, but more of curiosity and fascination. I'm 100% sure I was awake and that I really saw this. I work as an adult novelty store manager with a theater, so please envision the kind of customers I get. I had this regular who was nice enough and we always exchanged pleasantries and small talk. One day we said goodbye and as he went to leave he stopped dead in his tracks and came back to the counter. He told me that he ignores it every time, but today it wouldn't let him. So naturally I ask what the hell is he talking about. He proceeds to tell me that there is an older black man who is with me 24/7. He sees him every time I'm in the store. The older black man just stands next to me watching me and smiling. At that point a chill ran up my spine because no one in that store knows besides my boss that I'm half black and my 65-year-old black father that I was so close to passed in 2014. I said the usual wow and oh my god, so I wouldn't give anything away to see what else he says to see if it's legit. The customer proceeds to tell me that the man, my father, is sad about his kids not doing what he's asked them to do, and one particular child I has greatly disappointed him. The man, my father, also wants the customer to tell me how much he loves his wife, even though she's married again. At this point I have tears in my eyes because how would this man know there's conflict between me and my siblings because of my dad's death? How would this man know my mother is married again? He kept mentioning that he could feel a strong religious pull with my father. My father was a preacher. He told me a bunch of other things and asked if I was pregnant. I told him no, but apparently my next child will have my father's soul according to him. My 2-year-old son looks like my father and loves his favorite songs. I have never seen that man again. My friend and I were sleeping in my parents' room one night when she was over, and it was probably about 3 AM. Suddenly we hear a sound like a fart from the corner of the room, and distinctly from this one corner. So I ask my friend if she farted, and of course she says no as it clearly came from that corner. Thinking maybe it's my dogs as they sometimes sleep in my parents' room, I go and check it out, but realize they're not in the room with us. Okay, so that's weird I thought, and my friend also said she heard a distinct fart too, so we assumed that maybe we both misheard. Then all of a sudden an unknown caller starts ringing my phone and I don't answer, because at this point I'm freaked the fuck out. After I decline the call I receive a message from an unknown caller with the same area code as the caller who had just called me. The text message is all in Spanish and my friend decide to paste the text into Google Translate where it proceeds to say, "Did you hear that fart?" Needless to say we never slept in my parents' room again, and we are convinced that we have a Spanish farting ghost in our presence. Edit. No brothers that would have pranked me either. I have a sister, but she was as amused as I was when I told her. Freaky shit. So, I was definitely atheist pre this shit, now IDK what to believe. Last fall I had a dream with my deceased grandmother. We were in a casino in Wendover playing blackjack, and she was basically just catching up. She looked young again, and was in a very lovely black dress, and we drank, and laughed and played, then she had to go. It was a really vivid lovely dream. Cut to about a week later at my sister's birthday party. She's talking to one of our cousins about a dream she had a week prior with our deceased grandmother. Detail for detail, it was the same dream that I had not told anyone about. The difference: me and grandma played blackjack, they were playing poker. I still to this day have no logical explanation, but it's the strangest feeling I remember having. Well, I think I may have shared this once before, but I was driving with someone through a very odd small town in Arizona. As soon as we entered the city limits, I felt this extreme heaviness. Very surreal, dark, almost like a shroud of evil. As soon as we exited the limits, we both, not having spoken in a few minutes, said, "Did you feel that?" We both did. It was really weird. About a month later, I was reading Time magazine, I think it was Time, and there was an article about that town, and how it is so well known for cult-like polygamy and child marriage, etc. That explained a lot.